Devon and Nate confront Victor. Cain begs Phyllis to lie for him and Noah gets another nipping trouble. Moment on Young and Restless. Devon and Nate seek answers from Victor about Lily's whereabouts. Cain makes a concession to Phyllis, and Noah worries about Sienna's safety as Cain trapped Phyllis. Matt hovered Noah's life, and Nick pledged to put Matt in the ground. When Devon gets home, he notices Abby on her laptop, doing the books for society. She senses commodity is wrong. He explains his upset about his family and the twin being off the radar. He assumes he's overreacting after what happened with Dom. They are both trying not to be angry at Mariah. She admits she had a run heft with her and Christine. How is she out on bail? Devon reminds her that the important thing is their son is fine. Dom runs in to say he'd a bad dream. His parents assure him he's safe. He explains he pictured he was in a cold field and tried running to them, but they were made of snow. His mama offers to get him an redundant mask. He asks her to stay until he falls asleep. Abby puts the sprat to bed and returns once he's peaceful. She recalls how their son used to be hysterical of the murk in his room. Now he's fine and she's hysterical. They worry their son could be spoiling and decide to talk to a child psychiatrist in case he needs help. Nate shows up and Abby goes off to check on her son. Devon worries to his kinsman about Lily. Nate explains he talked to Victoria and Devon explains Cain admitted that Lily and the kiddies are being held by someone. They assume Victor is behind this. Devon is sure that Victor has been pushed to an extreme. They detest to suppose this could be true. Abby returns and her hubby tells her he and his kinsman are taking off to check on a lead. At Crimson Lights, Nick tells Sharon that his family wants him to fly to Milan with her to get Summer on their side against Phyllis. Sharon thinks they should stay before pushing her over the edge. Noah walks in with Sienna. They sit with his parents and he explains Sienna has agreed to move to city. They wonder why. She admits she felt uncomfortable in LA. They all know Matt is out again. Noah shows his parents the Navery dispatches Matt has transferred him. They're all shocked a judge let Matt out. Noah receives another hanging textbook, advising him to sleep with one eye open. Burrow joins them and they all step onto the yard. He explains the judge dismissed his case because Annie compromised it. Sienna always got bad vibes from that lady. Nick declares they need to find a way to stop Matt. Noah and Burrow want to help. Nick smothers. Everything is going wrong and Sharon should be concentrated on Mariah while he focuses on his pater. Burrow explains there's not much they can fairly do, so taking the law into their own hands might be the only option. Sharon and Nick are sure Matt is illogical enough to come back. Sienna thinks Sharon is right. None of them have the energy to deal with Matt again. Nick is sure Matt is a grim sickie and will be back. At the Newman estate, Victor tells his son he understands her plan to use Summer, but he won't encourage it. He doesn't want to drag Summer into this mess. His son says this is the stylish plan of attack. Her father explains Phyllis is egocentric and doesn't watch what anyone thinks, not indeed her son. Victoria thinks hitting Phyllis near to home is the easiest way to get results. He repeats he should be handling this alone and promises this will soon be over. They debate this. He says his taken way to make sure Cain feathers effects out presto. Victoria is sure that she can make Phyllis reevaluate her position. Cain will no way have the influence on her of her own meat and blood. Her pater says Nick won't go with her while he has to deal with Matt. Victoria is amazed this is passing again. She thinks Daddy and Nicholas will be busy so she should be fastening on Cain. Victoria promises not to add stress to her family. She tells her pater to concentrate on Matt. Devon and Nate show up and demand to know where Lily and the kiddies are. On Cain's train, Phyllis accuses him of being each over the place. He's been trying to betray her and is now taking her in tourney. They argue and she repeats that his family isn't in peril and Victor is only pretending. Cain says the world doesn't revolve around her. She can't understand how he can't see this is all a barranca. She declares she has the brass ring and is running with it. She has no sympathy for him and won't give back what she's earned. He thinks she'd feel else if Victor had her kiddies. Phyllis says she'd know it's a barranca. When she demands he let her go, he refuses. He tries to move her they could make commodity better than Newman. She doesn't believe it. He says she's formally beaten the unstoppable and can walk down. They can indeed draw Newman before handing it back. Phyllis can see his family is everything to him. That means he prevaricated to her when he claimed he was putting that away. She can see he's no way stopped loving Lily. Phyllis knows she was foolish to believe he was suitable to cut ties. He says it was his plan until he realized the jeopardy they're in. She knows this is all about love. He ain't give up on the three people he loves the most. Cain admits he was lying to himself when he told her that he'd walked down from his family. His family is the only thing that ever made him feel whole. Choking up, he says he missed them, saying they loved him. Love is everything to him. Nothing is worth losing it. He suggests they could find a way to wisecrack Victor long enough so he can get his family back. On a tense and emotionally charged occasion of The Young and the Restless, the fragile balance between fidelity and revenge shattered as secrets, reservations, and despair pushed several families to the point. The hour unfolded like a slow-burning storm over Genoa City, with Devon Hamilton and Nate Hastings stepping into dangerous home, induced that Victor Newman was pulling strings behind a nipping exposure. Meanwhile, Cain Ashby set up himself unraveling aboard his isolated train auto, contending with Phyllis Summers to help him outthink a man who has erected an conglomerate on fear. Across city, Noah Newman's attempt to sculpt out a peaceful future with Sienna was formally again poisoned by the brewing trouble of Matt Clark, whose shadow refuses to fade. Every plot collided under a heavy theme: how far will you go for family? At the extension, Devon returned home carrying the weight of two numerous unknowns. Abby was seated at her laptop, reviewing society's books with mechanical focus, but she tasted his pressure incontinently. Devon tried to play down it at first, persuading himself he was overreacting. After everything that had happened with Dominic in the history, he stressed he was projecting old trauma onto a new extremity. Yet Lily being off the grid, on with the halves, felt wrong on a primitive position. Abby admitted she too was unsettled, especially after her recent run heft with Mariah and Christine. The fact that bail had indeed been granted in similar chaos sounded surreal. Devon gently diverted her, reminding her that the one thing that signified most was that Dominic was safe. As if on cue, the little boy ran in, shaken from an agony about being lost in a frozen field while his parents stood just out of reach, made of snow. The imagery struck Devon and Abby to their cores. It felt emblematic of the emotional dispassionateness and distance hanging to seep into their world. Abby assured him, promising to stay until he fell asleep, her voice soft but her eyes clouded with solicitude. When she returned, she confessed that Dominic used to be scarified of the dark, and now he was stalwart than she was. They participated a painful consummation that children absorb further than parents realize. The idea of speaking to a child psychiatrist wasn't about fear. It was about forestallment. They refused to let generational trauma still take root. The atmosphere shifted when Nate arrived. Once Abby stepped down again, Devon commended in his kinsman. Cain had admitted Lily and the kiddies were being held by someone. The implied conclusion hung heavy between them. Victor Newman. Neither man wanted to believe it. Victor has crossed lines ahead, but hijacking grandchildren? It felt extreme, indeed, for him. Still, Devon's instinct screamed that Victor had been cornered, and cornered men are dangerous. Nate admitted he'd spoken to Victoria, and the family narrative coming from the Newman camp felt too controlled, too polished. That alone made Devon suspicious. They decided they couldn't sit back any longer, however. Defying him head-on was the only option, if Victor was involved. Abby re-enlisted as they prepared to leave, and Devon assured her they were following a lead. She read between the lines but said nothing, choosing rather to trust that Devon would cover them all. At Crimson Lights, another branch of the Newman family scuffled with chaos. Nick sat across from Sharon, torn between strategy and emotion. The plan being floated by the Newmans was ruthless cover to Milan, get Summer aligned against Phyllis, and use that fracture as influence. Sharon did it. Pushing Summer too hard could boomerang spectacularly. Before the debate could consolidate, Noah entered with Sienna, publicizing that she had agreed to move back to Genoa City. The relief was short-lived. Sienna confessed that Los Angeles had started to feel unsafe, not physically, but psychologically. Matt was out again. The news hit like ice water. Noah showed his parents the hanging dispatches Matt had transferred him, chilling monuments to sleep with one eye open. Sharon's motherly fear burned incontinently. Nick's jaw tensed with subdued fury. The legal system had formally again failed them. When Chance joined the group, He explained that procedural mistakes had compromised the case, leading to Matt's release. The injustice of it felt suffocating. Sienna admitted she'd always had bad instincts about Annie's involvement. Nick declared they demanded an endless result. Noah and Chance were ready to act, but Sharon prompted caution. Taking the law into their own hands would only produce further desolation. Yet everyone knew the verity Matt thrives on untreated business. And Genoa City is his stalking ground. Back at the Newman estate, Victor engaged in a separate strategic battle. Victoria argued that using Summer was their most effective move against Phyllis. Victor, unexpectedly, defied. He refused to drag Summer deeper into the crossfire. For all his manipulation, Victor draws strange moral lines. Victoria claimed that hitting Phyllis near to home would destabilize her. Cain's influence over her blanched compared to her own meat and blood. Victor combated that Nick's focus was divided with the Matt extremity. The family was stretched thin. Victoria offered to shoulder the Cain situation herself, promising not to burden the others. Victor's eyes revealed commodity-rare mistrustfulness. He assured her he'd formally taken way to neutralize Cain snappily. His confidence was calculated, but Victoria tasted urgency beneath it. Their debate was intruded by the appearance of Devon and Nate, who wasted no time demanding answers. Where were Lily and the children? Victor's expression hardened into controlled outrage. He neither verified nor denied involvement outright, rather questioning why Cain's word carried any credibility. The battle was electric. Devon indicted him of pushing Cain to despair. Nate advised that if Victor had crossed this line, the fallout would be unrecoverable. Victor calmly claimed that guarding family occasionally requires unwelcome optics. His nebulosity only strengthened their reservations. On Cain's train, emotional warfare reached its peak. Phyllis, furious and subdued, indicted Cain of twisting. He'd tried to double-cross her and was now effectively holding her interned. Cain argued that everything he'd done was for survival. Phyllis dismissed the hijacking narrative as a fabrication designed by Victor. She believed she held the upper hand in the commercial battle and refused to surrender what she'd fought to gain. Cain's countenance cracked as he asked how she'd feel if her own children were taken. Phyllis claimed she'd see through the manipulation. But Cain's voice quivered as he admitted the verity he'd been avoiding. He no way stopped loving Lily. His plan to ramify emotional ties had been tone deception. His family made him feel whole. Hearing his children say "I love you" was the only palm that signified. Phyllis saw it also, the vulnerability beneath the ambition. He wasn't fighting for power presently. He was fighting for redemption. Cain proposed a parlous alliance cube Victor long enough to recoup his family. Outwit the master strategist at his own game. Phyllis dithered. She thrives on chaos, but this was commodity deeper. Love versus pride. Fidelity versus influence. As night fell, Genoa City felt lower. Devon and Nate left the Newman estate without concrete answers but with heightened resoluteness. Sharon sat awake long after Nick fell into a restless sleep, hearkening for phantom sounds outside the window. Abby checked on Dominic doubly more, brushing hair from his forepart as he slept peacefully, ignorant of the storm circling him. Victoria goggled out at the dark grounds of the estate, wondering if her father's styles were eventually getting unpardonable. And on that train, Cain awaited for Phyllis to decide whether love was worth risking everything. This occasion didn't depend on explosions or courtroom verdicts. It was about fractures, small cracks widening under pressure. Victor's conglomerate, erected on control, now faces rebellion from every side. Devon and Nate refused to be bullied. Nick's defensive instincts hang to stamp legitimacy. Cain stands stripped of pride, adhering only to love. And Phyllis, eternal wildcard, must decide if she wants power or purpose. In Genoa City, family is both guard and armament. And as alliances shift and pitfalls resurface, one verity becomes inarguable: the once no way stays buried. It waits. It watches. And when the time is right, it strikes. The emotional foresharks of that unpredictable day gurgled outward, touching every corner of Genoa City and tensing the unnoticeable vestments that bind adversaries as tightly as abettors. By morning, the pressure had hardened into resoluteness. Devon slightly slept. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily's face, not alarmed, but disappointed. The study unsettled him further than any imagined peril. Lily Winters had always been the stabilizing force in their family, the bone, who balanced heart with pragmatism. However, also someone had crossed into insupportable home, if she was truly being held nearly against her will. And if that someone was Victor Newman, also the war brewing between their families was about to escalate beyond business and pride into commodity deeply particular. Nate arrived beforehand, coffee in hand, but indeed caffeine couldn't mask the strain in his expression. The two relatives redefined every word Victor had spoken. It wasn't what he said, it was what he didn't say. Victor had veered with surgical perfection, refusing to confirm or deny involvement. That nebulosity felt purposeful. Victor infrequently leaves loose ends. So if he allowed them to suspect him, maybe he wanted them detracted from commodity differently. Nate suggested the possibility that Victor was using fear as influence, pushing Cain into fear, segregating him from abettors, and forcing miscalculations. Devon, still, couldn't shake the feeling that this had gone further than cerebral warfare. Across city, Abby moved through society on autopilot, smiling for guests, issuing instructions to staff, and checking force as though routine could substitute for security. But beneath the polished surface, her mind replayed Dominic's agony. The imagery visited her, a frozen field, parents made of snow. She honored the conceit incontinently distance, fragility, exposure. Children process sweat in symbols, however, also the menage atmosphere was formally defiled by stress, if Dominic tasted insecurity. Abby called a reputed child psychologist, determined to secure an appointment before anxiety hardened into trauma. She refused to let external chaos insinuate her son's sense of safety. Meanwhile, Nick's frustration had evolved into commodity colder and more dangerous. Sitting at Crimson Lights long after the morning rush, he studied the hanging dispatches Matt had transferred Noah. The taunts were calculated, designed not simply to intimidate but to destabilize. Nick had spent his life navigating his father's ruthless strategies, but this was different. Victor operates within a law, depraved maybe, but predictable. Matt Clark operated without boundaries. Sharon joined him, her voice calm but establishment. They couldn't helical into nemesis. Every impulsive move would hand Matt the chaos he craved. Nick conceded her sense, yet the defensive instinct coddled just beneath the surface. However, he would, if the legal system couldn't shield his son. Noah, for his part, tried to project strength for Sienna. He comforted her that Genoa City was still home, that community signified, that running wasn't the result. Yet intimately, he scuffled with guilt. However, would she have been safer? Or was Matt's preoccupation tethered specifically to him? The idea that loving him placed her at threat eroded at his confidence. If Sienna had remained in Los Angeles, Sienna tasted the shift but chose sanguinity. Fear, she believed, only grows when fed. At the Newman estate, Victoria pressed Victor for clarity. She respected his strategic brilliance but questioned the optics of his silence. However, why not declare it unequivocally? Victor responded with a assignment in power denial subventions legality to blameworthiness, if he was innocent regarding Lily. By refusing to deify dubitation, he maintained dominance. Yet Victoria saw commodity rare flicker across his face, fatigue. The conglomerate demanded constant alert. Adversaries multiplied briskly than palms. She offered again to handle Cain directly, arguing that emotional prayers might succeed where intimidation failed. Victor advised her not to underrate despair. A man fighting for his family is able of reckless choices. On the train, Cain's despair strengthened. Phyllis paced the confined space, wrathfulness gradationally morphing into contemplation. She honored authenticity when she saw it, and Cain's vulnerability wasn't performative. He spoke of Lily and the halves with raw craving, admitting that every commercial initiative had been an attempt to prove he could stand singly, only to discover independence felt concave without connection. Phyllis heeded, arms crossed, guarding her own softer impulses. She has erected her identity on adaptability and reinvention. Admitting that love can destabilize strategy would mean admitting her own undetermined injuries. Still, the computation shifted. Helping Cain could yield influence against Victor, but it could also entangle her in emotional consequences she prefers to avoid. Devon and Nate decided to widen their disquisition. They communicated private security advisors, tracing Cain's recent movements and fiscal anomalies. Patterns began to crop, large recessions, and ciphered dispatches, off-the-grid trip routes. None verified Victor's involvement directly, yet the complication suggested at someone with substantial coffers orchestrating events. Devon's wrathfulness intensified.